Greenlightnetwork presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show with Champ Chesterfield and Achilles. We're here to do the AFC recap and free agency review here today. Last week we hit up the NFC. Achilles, are you ready to hit up the AFC?
Yeah, buddy. Just the mic's a little loud there. Yeah. I guess you're excited about getting into this free agency stuff because you sure sound like it.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, so let's go into the AFC. Let's start out west. Let's start out east. On the east side of things, let's go into the Buffalo Bills. They didn't make a whole lot of free agency moves. They re-signed a lot of guys. Matt Milano and Darrell Williams were probably their two biggest guys to re-sign. Then they re-signed Mitchell Trubisky. Well, they didn't re-sign. They brought in Mitchell Trubisky. And then they brought also in probably their biggest signing after letting John Brown go, Emmanuel Sanders. So after a big Buffalo year last year, what did you make of the signings, and what is your outlook for the Buffalo Bills?
I mean, I think they did a pretty good job as far as free agency is concerned. They definitely signed what I probably consider one of the better backups, just based off of win records. I know that his numbers weren't crazy, but he was solid. And if you look back at their season when he was in Chicago, the only reason they were doing anything was because of him. They actually were winning because of him. And I know that when we looked at the games, it didn't really seem like it, but that's what was happening. He was pulling out wins. So to have him there as a backup, I think is probably a good thing. Their season they had a great season. It's hard to argue with the results. They obviously made it to the playoffs and they won their division. And I think that, it's really hard for teams that are good to kind of continue on that path when it comes to free agency, because a lot of their money tends to be tied up with their starters. But I think that they worked with what they had, and I think they did a good job. I think that they're probably going to be good going forward. I was still interested to see what they're going to do in the draft, but I think as far as free agency is concerned, I think they did a good job.
Yeah, definitely. I do really like the Emmanuel Sanders move, essentially getting rid of John Brown and getting Emmanuel Sanders in there. I just like the sort of slot position he can play. Then he can go outside. It gives him a little bit more of an in-between type guy. John Brown, as much as I like him, is a little bit of more of a deep threat, and I think he sort of cost him some of those games down the stretch where he could only go, really deep. He wasn't sort of an in-between guy, and with Cole Beasley, who got beat up, down the stretch, I think it's just good to have Emmanuel Sanders in there, and then you could sort of let Diggs fly. What did you make of that move?
I like it. My only concern is, they did have a little bit of an issue when it came to their running game last season, especially early on. It seemed like they got better as the season progressed. But the skill position, they've got some talented wide receivers. The Emmanuel Sanders one is the only one that concerns me a little bit. I know that you were talking about the Brown one, but to me, Sanders, he's fast, he's quick, he can run really good routes, but he does have a tendency to get hurt a lot. And I think that this team isn't stacking up for a playoff run. They're trying to stack up to go all the way. And not having guys like him available could become an issue. But again, that's neither here nor there because the season hasn't started and we still have to see it happen. But I think overall it was a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that a little bit. Their running back, I think we were both pretty disappointed in Devin Singletary this season. I think we both thought at the beginning of the year he was probably going to sort of break out, with Frank Gore gone. But it just never seemed to click for him. I don't know if they I guess we'll get into that next week with our draft team needs. I'm assuming you probably will put running back on that list. But anyway, maybe you don't, and you think they're okay with Devin Singletary. I guess Zach Moss, towards the end of the year, last year started to look a little bit better. Do you think they need to upgrade that running back position, or are you probably okay with the two guys they got there, mixing in, a little bit of Josh Allen, though my guess is they probably want to try to reduce Josh Allen running more and more as he gets older.
Now, I do expect that to be the situation in Buffalo. I expect them to try to lean a little bit off of the running backs more as opposed to using their quarterback to run ball. But that's one of the reasons why they had success this season. Their running attack was probably one of the better only because of the quarterback being able to scramble, get out of the pocket, and break off big runs. But you would think that having a quarterback like that would have helped that running game more, and the fact that they really didn't produce as much as we expected is a little concerning for me, and I would think that that's probably something they have to address in the draft. But you never know. I mean, maybe this is the season where he, really lives up to what we thought he would after Greg Moore left in the draft, and maybe it takes a little bit of the pressure off Allen. So that all remains to be seen. But overall, maybe something they look into.
Yeah, definitely. Defensive side of things, they bring back bring back a couple other guys. Their defense was sort of hot and cold, I think. What do you make of their defense? Do you think there's anything they can do there? I think pass rush was probably their biggest bugaboo, and I thought that would be an upgrade for them coming into the season.
Yeah, I mean, the defense, listen, there were plenty of games where that defense not cost them, but could have won games had they, been able to shut things down. For example, that Arizona game comes to mind. They obviously lost that game, which was kind of important. In the end, it didn't really matter. They still won their division. But, games like that become important, especially when teams know where that defense what type of offense you're going to run, and they can kind of slow that offense down, and you're going to be more dependent on that defense to actually shut teams down. So, yeah, that pass rush is a little concerning. Again, it's hard to really argue with the team that won their division and played so well, regardless of their shortcomings. I think that their future is still bright as long as Josh Allen can stay healthy, and I do think that they're definitely going to target some defensive players. Exactly what and who, that's still a question mark. That's something for Dynamite Dave to look into. But it definitely is an issue of concern. I think that running back and defense is probably one of those things that they're going to have to look into the draft.
Yeah, definitely. So, little preview on their upcoming season. Do you think the Bills still probably the heavy favorite to win that AFC East?
I wouldn't say heavy favorite, simply because I'm not trying to count the Pats out. I know that they haven't really made a big splash. They went out and spent. We'll talk more about it, obviously.
I think we'll get to their spending spree here in a second.
But it's hard for me to really go against Bill Belichick, regardless of how good this Bills team is. I think that Bill Belichick is still the cream of the crop when it comes to coaching in that division. So I would say that it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to win. But I have to think that they're still the favorites.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, so that's our Buffalo Bills. Let's move to a team way down south, a very interesting team, the Miami Dolphins. So I think we probably should open with that draft day trade, or not draft day, but the draft trade where they trade back to 11 to let the San Francisco 49ers move up. We talked about the Niners moving up, getting a quarterback. Then they make a trade to move up to 6. I'm assuming there's probably going to be a receiver there. Tua's going to be the full-time starter. Ryan Fitzpatrick moved on to the Washington football team. They brought in Will Fuller. For the 8 games he plays, I assume he will be a very nice deep threat to throw to, but I have yet to see really him play a full season. Not much else, not a ton else really in free agency. Bringing in a handful of, guys to fill out a roster. But what is your outlook on this Miami Dolphins team over free agency and going into next season?
I mean, when it comes to free agency, not the biggest splash possible. I think that they probably lost some players that, even though they weren't projected to be starters like Ryan Fitzpatrick, I still think it kind of hurts the team a little bit. Regardless of what you think of him, I know he's a journeyman, but it seems like everywhere he goes, he does enough to at least win over the locker room. And to me, it seems like he's that type of guy. So losing him, I think, hurts him a little bit. But obviously, the main focus on that team is going to be Tua. You bring in Will Fuller. I don't know how much he's going to help you if he can't stay healthy. When you have a young quarterback, it's really important to have a lot of continuity. And bringing a guy like Fuller in, although he does have, light and fast speed and he can go over the top of defenses, if he's available, he's definitely helpful. But if he's not, I think it digresses, just takes away from the fact that you paid the guy, what was it, 10 million a year?
I think he got a 1 year 10-6 guarantee, so it's only a 1 year deal. So
Yeah,
it's sort of a make good type of thing. I don't know, especially we didn't go over the Miami Dolphins have like $200 billion in cap space as well. So I mean. But I was just curious on your take on the Will Fuller move because, we both seen him play. When he's on, he's one of the best receivers in the league. But, we talked about it at the end of last season. I mean, this Dolphins team already had Devontae Parker's injury history, Preston Williams' injury history. Now you're throwing in Will Fuller. You're sort of painting yourself into a corner where you're going to be like, no weapons once again. They were literally picking up receivers off the street, the last 4 weeks of the season there. So I was just curious on your take on the Will Fuller move. Do you like it? Because, I do think it's an upgrade over a Parker and a Preston Williams as it is.
Yeah, I think it's an upgrade. The question becomes how much of an upgrade. And I don't think it's significant enough to warrant the fact that he's had a history of injuries. Yes, it's a 1 year deal, but let's say the guy stays healthy and he builds a good rapport with Tua. What happens next year? He's going to demand a much higher value, and then that's where some of your cap space is going to go. So I think that they still probably have to look at that wide receiver position in the draft. Maybe they can find, some sort of gem that they really like, some guy that they can develop, that they can keep on the roster for cheap money. Because if this Fuller thing happens to work out for them, and for both the Dolphins and for Fuller, he's going to demand a bigger payday next season. And if they want to keep him to build continuity with Tua, like I said, it's going to cost them. So they definitely need some cheaper options also.
Yeah, definitely so. Overall on the Dolphins, do you think they're going in the right direction here? They're certainly playing the off-season game quite smartly. I think they have fleeced the Texans to the point of, I think we'll be talking about that deal with Lancey Tunsil for 50 years coming. But anyway, just overall take on the Miami Dolphins and their outlook. I'm curious where you sort of see their progress in the next, let's go 2 seasons to 3 seasons. Do you think they'll be one of those top teams, or do you think they're ready to make that move this season?
I think the potential for them to do it within the next couple of years is definitely there. The question is definitely going to be, again, continuity. It's you have a young quarterback who didn't really play the entire season because they had Fitzpatrick and him kind of in and out, throughout the season. So you definitely need to get a full season of Tua. You need to get him, under center. You need to get him settled down. You got to get him, some talented wide receivers on the outside, which they tried doing, but health is going to be a big issue too. But they definitely have it. They have the youth. That defense showed up several times last season, and they played against some really tough teams. And they even some of the elite teams, they played them really tough. So I think we talked about it throughout the season last season that they were a really tough team to face, and you saw when they went up against those elite teams. They can fight. They can fight with just about anybody. So health and continuity is going to be a big issue, and development also. So we'll see what happens. But I think that if they can follow those trends, the trend they've been following, then they'll probably be a good team in the next couple seasons.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, let's move back up north and touch on the New York Jets. Speaking of teams that spent,
Your New York Jets.
yeah, the New York Jets spent. They brought in two big time receivers. Well, one big time receiver, one very big receiver. I don't know if he's quite big time, but Corey Davis signed with them there. 3 years, $12.5 million deal. He's occasionally been really, really good, and occasionally we haven't even known he's on the field. Re-signed Marcus May, got rid of Sam Darnold, so that's going to be interesting. I assume we both think Zach Wilson's probably going to be taken with the number 2 pick there. Bring in Sheldon Rankins from New Orleans. So it was a big offseason for the Jets. Does this mean they have hope, or does this mean we'll be talking about a lot of guys who took a payday to lose a lot of games with the Jets in probably week 4 by then?
Well, if history tells us anything, it's these guys sign contracts to get paid and lose games because that's what the Jets have been doing lately. The fact that they gave up on Sam Darnold was a little bit, I don't want to say shocking, but probably surprising. It's a weird situation up there. I know that they've got a little bit of money to spend, and you bring in a guy like Corey Davis, who, like you said, he's performed well before. But how much of that was the fact that he had a pretty good quarterback throwing him the ball? He had a pretty good running back to take pressure off the wide receivers, and he had other talented wide receivers on the other side, opposite of him, that were actually helping take some of the coverage away from him. So. I want to see what he does being the spotlight guy, because I think that's kind of what they brought him in for, to be like the main guy on this team. I don't know, man. It's the Jets. I mean, they're the Jets. That's all I can really say about them. I hope they do well. I think the reason for this whole transition they're doing of getting rid of their quarterback and kind of looking forward to the future is to give hope to the fans. So hope is there. What are they going to do with it is the question.
Yeah, I will say defensively, I do see some upside on this team, especially with C.J. Mosley coming back. Quinnen Williams should be back. He was pretty banged up all season. We mentioned they signed Sheldon Rankins from New Orleans. You got Carl Lawson on that outside. You bring in Marcus May and LaMarcus Joyner. So, I mean, it's a solid unit on that on paper. I should say it's a solid unit on paper. It hasn't always translated to a solid unit on the field, but I still don't see this offense really being anything worthwhile. And I think getting the coach out of there probably helps a little bit. But now you're asking I'm assuming a rookie quarterback to come in there and man this ship. And I don't know if I see a ton of success on the offensive side of things, but maybe the defense can carry them while we're both assuming Zach Wilson tries to find his sea legs. Do you think they will be better at developing a quarterback than they have been in years past to make this team competent, really?
Well, again, I go back to recent history. Recent history has shown us that they don't develop quarterbacks well. They kind of do a whole carousel thing. And I mean, if that's going to be the case, then I feel bad for whoever's coming in, but hope is what they're selling right now. And they can take that and they can run with it and do exactly what they've been doing, which is not much, or they can take it and actually start, building up something that these fans can be proud of. And for any Jet fans' sake, I hope that that's the case. But I think they're still ways away from becoming a competitive team. Although, like you said, they definitely showed some flashes last season, especially that one big game against the Rams.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, I think we've touched on the Jets enough. I think we'll have more Jets talk probably after the draft, and then it should be a fun preseason when we preview the New York Jets. We'll move on to the big spenders. New England did something they have really not done since probably the mid 90s. They spent a whole lot of money. They brought in two tight ends, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, both really, really good tight ends for other teams. I don't know totally about the price, but you've got that two tight end offense that made the Patriots so successful. They bring in Nelson Aguilar, who had a pretty solid season for the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm a little scared about that money. $16 million guaranteed over 2 years for Nelson Aguilar. Seems like a lot of money. They signed Matthew Judon to a $32 million guaranteed deal. They brought back James White, which I think was a nice little signing. Kyle Van Noy heads back up there after signing with the Dolphins. I can continue going on. They bring in Kendrick Bourne from San Francisco, who was a nice deep play receiver. So, what did you make of this New England offseason? Oh, I should touch. They brought Cam Newton back, too. I guess we'll probably have to have a discussion. Do we think Cam Newton is really going to be their starting quarterback? But let's get to the free agency signings. What do you make of the New England Patriots spending? And do you think they spent well?
Shocking is the first word that comes to mind because it's not what we're accustomed to seeing from the New England Patriots. We're used to seeing people take pay cuts to play for this team, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that you had Brady and Belichick there. Now that duo has been split, things have changed a little bit. Obviously, you have guys like Edelman retiring, and even though Gronk came back, Gronk retired himself. There's something going on in New England. I don't know quite what it is, but it seems to have opened the floodgates as far as wallets are concerned because they spent a lot of money and they did lose a few key pieces. But it's Bill Belichick, man. If anyone can build anything with a bunch of different guys and a bunch of young rookies, it's Bill Belichick. So I'm not going to be too hard on the Patriots. I think that their record and recent history speaks for itself. I think that if you're a New England Patriot fan like the wife is, I think you just kind of trust the process and just kind of go along with it. Cam Newton, I think, is going to be a serviceable backup quarterback to a rookie quarterback. That's what I foresee. So I'm just gonna assume that Bill Belichick is kind of right the ship. That's what I'm assuming.
Well, I got. Let's start on the defensive side of things. They do have a handful of guys coming back on the defensive side of the ball, plus returning a whole lot of good defensive guys. I mean, you look at their defensive depth chart, and they really have some really good players. So I think they can be a really, really good, probably top 5 defense in the league next year. I mean, 2 years ago, they were one of the best defenses in the league for the first about 14 weeks of the season. I thought their defense was pretty solid last year as well. My questions come to you on the offensive side of things. They spent a lot of money, and you look at this depth chart, it's wide receiver, it's Aguilar, Bourne, Jacoby Myers, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry. Is that good enough to create offensive plays with, theoretically, right now, Cam Newton as your quarterback? Or I don't know. I'm just not sold as Aguilar, Bourne, Jonnu Smith, and Hunter Henry as a 4-person quartet that you could run great offense in. But then, Bill Belichick has his 2 tight end set. I do respect both Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. I just don't know if they can create enough offense, even with the money they spent on those guys.
I like the Jonnu Smith one. Hunter Henry, you
I
know,
think that's the one I'm more torn on. I think he's probably. I think we touched on it with Will Fuller. At his top elite level, I think Hunter Henry's a really, really good tight end. But, I mean, I don't know how many total games he ended up playing with the Chargers, but he seemed hurt for half the season every year that he played. So, I don't know. It just seemed like a lot of money for him and Nelson Aguilar. And I don't know if those are really number one elite type guys.
yeah, I think that on paper, this is definitely not the type of team that you stay up at night if you're a defense and you know worried about how you're going to stop these guys. Because on paper, they're
Certainly,
just
if you've watched Cam Newton throw in the last 2
wait,
years.
wait. He still throws the ball. 'Cause, yeah, I don't know. I was convinced that he was probably done after last season. The fact that he came back was a little shocking, but I think that they had no choice. There was slim pickings out there, although I think if they would have traded for some of these guys, they probably could have put together a better squad. But that's neither here nor there. Like you said, I'm just going to trust that Bill Belichick knows exactly what he's doing. I'm going to trust his process. But on paper, man, this just it looks like a very anemic offense. But we've seen Bill Belichick do a lot with very little before. So I'm not going to, throw dirt on his tactics.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's move out of the NFC or AFC East and move to the Central here. Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben coming back. Juju Smith-Schuster signed a really cheap deal to come back to this team here. I'm just curious overall, what did you make of the Pittsburgh Steelers offseason? I thought they got a great deal in Schuster. Bud Dupree does leave, but I think they should be pretty solid once again on defense. Bud Dupree got hurt last year, and their defense still sort of maintained a pretty solid presence. James Conner just left, but I don't see that as really all that big a loss. So curious about your take on the Pittsburgh Steelers free agency offseason.
I think they did pretty good. Obviously, they had a really good defense, especially the first three quarters of the season last season. They seemed to try to keep that core group together. Like you said, there were a couple guys that were in and out with injuries, and even though the defense seemed to lose a step or two here, they didn't lose much of a step. They were still kind of up there as far as defensive rankings go. Their big issue was definitely on offense. I felt like they were lacking weapons. I don't know if it was the quarterback. I don't know if it was the running. I think the running game probably played a factor in it, but they probably also need some help at wide receiver. So the fact that they can get Schuster for that price is probably a good idea. It's definitely a positive sign for them. But, they were a solid team last season, and it seemed that even with some of the adversity they dealt with COVID and all that, games being delayed, they still did pretty good. So I'm not going to fault them for the moves that they made. I think that they did what they had to do. They signed the guys they were supposed to sign. But I still think that they're going to be active when it comes to the draft, and we could see some action from Pittsburgh, which is not something that you normally say.
Yeah, I think their defense will be fine with or without Bud Dupree, as long as you have like Cameron Haywood and T.J. Watt, and I'm assuming Devin Bush will be back, healthy at some point next season. Minkah Fitzpatrick playing safety, Cam Sutton on one side of the corner. I think you're just fine. My big question about them is I think Ben Roethlisberger can be a serviceable quarterback in the regular season. I don't know if he can win playoff games anymore. I know you can't just be like, leave, it's time to go, thank you for your service. That's only something the New England Patriots do. But anyway, I'm just curious on your take. Ben Roethlisberger coming back. They did sign Dwayne Haskins. I don't know if that's... I guess our laughter answers our own question on that one. So
Yeah, listen, like you said, Big Ben, and I like him. I was really rooting for him last season. I thought that him coming back after that injury was really going to propel that team, and it definitely seemed like I was some sort of football genius early on because they were putting up some pretty crazy numbers. But a lot of it had to do with the defense. Even though the offense was doing okay in the beginning of the season, a lot of it was that defense. And I think that you're right. I think that Big Ben will probably help you win some games during the regular season. But it seems as the longer the season goes, the more his age starts to show. And not that he's old, because I'm not one to be talking, but he's football old, and he's had a lot of injuries, and his body's been through a lot. I know he's a really big guy, but he's taking a lot of hits. That body, it's definitely slowing down. So something maybe to consider in the draft also is start looking towards the future, because as it stands now, you have a pretty solid team. The free agent signings you did kind of lock in at least the potential to be solid for the next couple of years. So maybe you start thinking about the future a little bit.
Yeah. We'll move on to the Ravens because I think the Steelers and the Ravens are hovering about the same level. And I'm just curious on your take because I think it might not be a big step back, but I think both the Steelers and Ravens might take a small step back. And we'll get to the Cleveland Browns in a second after the Ravens to see if maybe they step up and can put themselves in contention to win this division. But, the Ravens lose a couple defensive guys that they don't re-sign, but I think this defense is still solid, but it does start to age a little bit. Derek Wolfe, Calais Campbell, all really good players. Same with Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters. They're all good players or were good players at one, but I think they're starting to age a little bit now. They made a big hullabaloo about signing Sammy Watkins, and they've solved their wide receiver problems. I don't know if Sammy Watkins solves your wide receiver problems, considering he was about the sixth option in Kansas City. Granted, they have a lot of playmakers, but I don't know if Sammy Watkins, Marquise Sprout, and Miles Boykin all of a sudden turn Lamar Jackson into Patrick Mahomes here. I still think they need upgrades on offense because it's a lot of Lamar Jackson doing a whole lot of stuff, and I still don't think these are adequate enough weapons to sort of get the ball through. I am curious on your take on the Ravens here.
Well, the Ravens, I think, I'm right there with you as far as them probably taking a little bit of a step back. It's concerning because last season we talked about it. Basically, it feels like we were talking about it every week. They needed a lot of help on the outside. They were putting a lot of pressure on Jackson, and even though they weren't really running him as much in the beginning of the season, they seemed to go back to it towards the end of the season, and it really helped their offense, and it opened things up for the wide receivers a little bit. But the wide receivers weren't helping themselves, and they weren't helping Jackson. They weren't helping that running game. So definitely something they need to address, I think, in the draft. Maybe try to bring in like a big body possession type receiver because you've got some speed on the outside, but it's just I don't think there's enough talent out there, and I'm not trying to down talk any of these guys out there. They're all fairly talented individually, but as a unit, I don't think there's enough talent out there to really cause concern, to really make defenses take your eyes off of Jackson, and it's probably one of the reasons why they took a step back this last season, and probably why I kind of assume that they're going to take a small step back this season also.
Yeah, I just think this team, both them and Pittsburgh, I think if things like don't break necessarily perfectly for them, they both could be 9-7, pretty easy. I think they have a range probably to about 11 wins max. This is before the draft, but I think both them and the Steelers could drop if, things break, poorly. You lose, a game here or there on, a random, spin of the football here and there. I do think they could drop to a 9-win team here with what I'm looking at on this roster as currently assembled.
Yeah, the question then becomes is how tough is the rest of this division going to be? Is it going to be enough, or is 9 wins going to be enough to get you, over the hump? And I don't know. Obviously, on paper, it, I don't know. We're just gonna have to wait and see what they do in the draft, and I think we'll get a better feel for where we think this team's going.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of on paper, a team I don't think either of us really loved last year, thought they were a little bit overrated, but you pull up this team's depth chart, and it's a whole lot of people whose names I think everybody knows. So the Cleveland Browns.
I know them.
Yes. The Cleveland Browns, added Clowney the other day. They got two big-time edge rushers in Garrett and Clowney, two big guys to plug up that middle in Richardson and Jackson, Denzel Ward at corner, Ronnie Harrison Jr. at safety. It's a loaded defense, and then you go to offense, and you see Chubb, you see Hunt, you see Beckham Jr. theoretically going to be back, you see Jarvis Landry, Higgins, Hooper. It's a loaded team. Now, the offensive line is still, so-so. They did upgrade it a little bit by a couple free agent signings. I think your biggest question marks here are Baker, can he make even a more leap from a let's go game manager into an actual elite level quarterback here? And can the Cleveland Browns, make a leap from a solid team that beats up on weaker competition into a team that can play and beat elite style teams? What do you make of this Browns roster? What did you make of the Browns in free agency here?
On paper, I think that the Cleveland Browns are probably the favorite to win this division. Just looking at them on paper, looking at that roster. Now, the issue then becomes is what type of quarterback player are you going to get? Are you going to get the game manager Baker Mayfield that you got during some games last season? Because if you do, I think that they'll be solid enough to make the playoffs again. But if you can get an improved Baker Mayfield, the guy who's going to, really be able to read defenses and make plays and change plays at the line of scrimmage and really become an elite quarterback, then this team becomes a really dangerous team because, like you said, on defense, they're really stacked. You brought in Johnson, you brought in Hill, to really help out on that secondary. And you said, like, on offense, you got Chubb, you got Beckham, you've got a lot of weapons. So if he can take that step, that everybody is really hoping, at least Cleveland fans are really hoping he takes, then this team becomes a very dangerous team because, like we said about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last season, on paper, they have all the weapons on both offense and defense, and that's exactly how this team looks on paper. But we don't play this game on paper. We play it on the field. And unless he takes us a leap forward, I think that they'll probably be still a good team, but not quite, ready for the big show yet.
Yeah. All right. Way too early predictions. Who do you think wins this division? We haven't gotten to Cincinnati yet, but I don't think they're going to make the leap. So Steelers, Ravens, Browns. Who do you have winning this division on the early side of things?
Let's see. On paper, I have the Browns winning this division. What my brain tells me is the Steelers.
Yeah, definitely so. All right. Let's move to the Cincinnati Bengals. Interesting offseason. They didn't re-sign William Jackson. I didn't quite understand that. And then they spent that money on a corner who's not quite as good as Jackson. Anyway, I don't quite understand what they did this offseason. I don't quite understand the Bengals ever, other than they have very poor ownership. But what do you make of their weird offseason, especially that random corner situation where they let the better corner go and then sign a worse corner for pretty much the exact same money? They didn't really add anything all that much to a team that was really sort of bad. AJ Green goes, but I'm not sure that's the worst thing in the world. By the time the season ended, he was a number 3 receiver. But Cincinnati Bengals, go.
let's see. They showed a lot of promise early on in the season, especially with their young rookie quarterback. Unfortunately, the head coach decided to really drive that guy into the ground, and we saw what the results of that was. It was a season-ending injury. Now, timetable for return, you're probably a little more, informed as far as when we could expect to see him on the field again. But I think that they're basically kind of banking their money on not much is going to get done this season because of that injury. So let's just kind of put together a squad to put on the field and see what we can do and look forward to rebuilding in the future because the main guy, the heart and soul of that team is their quarterback, and that's something that you can't quite depend on right now. So I don't like the moves they made, but I understand that they had to make some of these moves, especially when you had certain guys that decided to go elsewhere. I don't know if it was decided by them or if it was a mutual thing with the team and the player, but yeah, some of these moves are questionable, and it's the Bengals, so I'm not really surprised. But I think that they're probably looking more long term than anything.
Yeah, their motto should probably be "We're the Bengals. We put a squad on the field." I don't perceive them to be very good. I'm very interested to see what they do in the draft. I'm hearing very random things of them not scoring up offensive line help and them drafting receivers. So it should be interesting. We'll get into that after the draft. We'll move to the South and the Houston Texans. This thing is pretty much a mess. We won't touch too much on the Deshaun Watson masseuse issues, but anyway, they had Deshaun Watson issues before the masseuse issues, but they bring in Tyrod Taylor, who might end up getting more playing time than we think. David Johnson is still around. Sadly, Brandon Cooks re-signed for a long-term deal, and somehow that career has cratered into the Houston Texans and a bad situation. I don't know. They have no defensive guys really left, and they were awful on defense last year. I don't know. Give me some sort of promising news for the Houston Texans.
J.J. Watt went to Arizona.
That's correct. That means he's no longer on this bad defense.
I mean, listen, we talked about it throughout the season. They were just making a lot of really bad moves. They had a lot of money tied up in certain situations. They were getting rid of a lot of their draft capital. They weren't in a really good position. So they ended up getting rid of their head coach slash GM, which is making a lot of these decisions. But unfortunately, once you sign these deals, the deals are basically set in stone. So they're not getting any of those draft picks back. They're not getting any of that money back. So we knew they were going to be in a tough spot. So the moves that they made are not surprising whatsoever. They're the moves that they can make. Unfortunately for them, all they can really hope for is some sort of, I don't know, one of those type of seasons where the locker room gets together and says it's us one of those us against the world type of situations where they just kind of get together and play really good, offense and defense. But I don't think this team's going to be good. I don't think anybody's really expecting them to be good. So, again, they did what they had to do. That's all I really have to say about this team.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move to the Colts. In comes Carson Wentz. They re-signed T.Y. Hilton. They do re-sign Marlon Mack, though I'm not sure how healthy he's going to be coming off a torn Achilles. But Taylor, Marlon Mack, Naheem Hines. It's a nice little three-way at running back. Hilton stays on a pretty cheap deal. Sticks around for at least one more year. The defense pretty much stays the same. They don't lose really anybody too impactful. This Colts team, closet sneaky favorite to come out of the AFC, or do you think the Wentz thing is going to crush them?
Listen, it depends on what Wentz they get. If they can get the Wentz that we saw in Philadelphia, that his rookie season, and even the season after that, even though he dealt with a couple of nagging injuries, I think this is going to be a pretty good team. We saw them be good with Phillip Rivers at the helm. Mind you, this is Phillip Rivers that we're talking about. Injury prone, not so much here and there, but turnover prone, definitely, especially over the last few seasons. He wasn't the Phillip Rivers that we were used to seeing back in his heyday in San Diego. So as long as he plays well, man, this could turn out to be a good situation for them. All they really need is someone to manage the game. They have a pair of pretty decent running backs. They get to keep Ty, which he's not the Ty he was, but he's still a really good wide receiver. He still has some gas left in that tank. He's got wheels, so they could be sneaky. They could definitely be sneaky. I don't know. I want to see what they do in the draft, and I think that's really going to either sell me on this team or not. But last season, I think they surprised a lot of people, and they played really well, and they almost pulled off a division win. I think it came down to the last game of the season, so definitely someone to keep your eye on.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, let's move to an interesting team. The Jacksonville Jaguars. They'll bring in Trevor Lawrence. James Robinson stays at running back, but they bring in Carlos Hyde to back him up. This receiving crew, I actually really like DJ Chark, Marvin Jones Jr., Latavius Shenault. They bring in Marvin Jones Jr., keep DJ Chark and Latavius Shenault, and that's a nice little piece. They, still have a little bit to go on defense, but you have some nice pieces in Josh Allen and Miles Jack and C.J. Henderson here. You bring in Shaquille Griffin from Seattle, who's a solid corner. How far away do you think this Jacksonville Jaguars team is, theoretically implanting Trevor Lawrence in there at quarterback for them?
I still think that they're, even with Lawrence, I still think that they're, a few steps away from getting to where they want to get to. With that being said, could this be a type of situation where this entire franchise is revitalized by the fact they're bringing in, a big name head coach, a big name quarterback? I could see it. I could definitely see this being like a Cinderella type story. But how often does that really happen in the NFL? It's very rare that we see, first year quarterback, first year head coach, taking a team that won 2 games last season, and completely turning it around. I think one of the last teams that did from worst to first was the Rams back in St. Louis, and they weren't really that bad. They were bad, but they weren't as bad as the Jaguars were last season. So we both like the Jaguars. They showed a lot of promise. They showed a lot of grit, but this is definitely a new team, especially offensively. I do like the additions they made. I think that they're definitely trending upwards, but I want to see it all on the field before I, put the mortgage on any of this.
Yeah, definitely so. I do think they might be able to sneakily fight for Tennessee at that number 2 spot. We'll get into Tennessee here. I just think they lost a handful of guys. I don't love the Bud Dupree signing, mostly because of money and him coming off an Achilles injury. They still have A.J. Brown. I don't know how much you like Josh Reynolds, but I was never a huge Josh Reynolds fan, and they bring him in. They re-sign Frisker. They lose Jonnu Smith. I just, they were a little bit in cap hell, so, they did have to, get rid of a handful of guys. Dedmon King gone. We already spoke about Corey Davis Jr. signing somewhere. Jadeveon Clowney signed somewhere else. Now, he wasn't all that much of a help to him. But I don't know. I don't like the moves they made too much. I don't think they've improved the defense enough to make the defense, at least average, because they were way below average last season. And I think they're going to hurt a little bit more on offense than they think they are with the losses of Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis. So I'm just curious on your take on the Tennessee Titans offseason.
Yeah, I agree with you. As much as I want to make it sound really nice for our colleague Dynamite, I think the fact that losing Jono is he wasn't amazing, but he definitely added a different element. He could definitely exploit those mismatches. When he went up against the smaller corners or the slower linebackers. So he was definitely a mismatch, option. The fact that you had him on the team would draw some attention to his side, which opened things up for guys like Corey Davis. Um, but ultimately, I think this team is going to revolve around the king himself, Henry, and they have him, and they still got some pretty good wide receivers on the outside, and they still have a pretty decent quarterback who's had several good years. Even with that horrible defense that they had last season, they still won their division. So I'm not going to sit here and just assume that they've fallen off. They're trying to improve. There hasn't been much of an improvement. If anything, they might have taken a step back, but they're just in one of those situations where they probably really only have to compete with one team, and that's the Colts. So it's more favorable for them, given the circumstance that they're in this division. But I do think that they're probably taking a step back. And again, if somehow the Colts can get some sort of good play or game management, from Wentz, then I think that Tennessee's probably in trouble, even as talented as I think that some of their guys are.
Yeah, definitely so. I didn't love the defensive signings. The money they saved getting rid of Smith and Davis and bringing in Bud Dupree for $35 million guaranteed. I just didn't love a handful of those moves, but we'll see how they do. You can't ever count out a team that has Derrick Henry behind center because you can build your whole offense around him. But let's move out west and let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of offensive line movement here. They get rid of some of the staples and they bring in Kyle Long out of retirement. They bring in Joe Thuney. I don't know if it's really a downgrade. It'll just be a little bit different. They do lose Sammy Watkins, but really you just sort of put McCole Hardeman in his place. And I really like DeMarcus Robinson, so I don't know how much you totally lose there. Defensively, it's starting to get a little bit older. You still have Chris Jones. I didn't like the way Frank Clark looked last year. Mathal's still there, but I do think this defense is starting to age out a little bit, and I think you saw a little bit of that in the Super Bowl, especially in the second half when the Bucs sort of took advantage of them. I'm curious on your take on the Kansas City Chiefs, the sort of offensive line shuffle. They didn't exactly bring in bad guys, but it's new guys. So you think there's going to be any sort of, let's go with slow start to the season. Slow start means they win 12 games instead of, like 14. But I'm curious just on your take on the Kansas City Chiefs in the offseason here.
It's hard for me to really count, Patrick Mahomes out in any situation, regardless of who he's got. He still has a lot of talented weapons on that offense.
Yeah, I was going to say Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, all still there.
Yeah, you're golden. You got those two guys. You got freaking the cheetah on the one side, and you got what's Kelsey's nickname? Let's call him semi truck. I don't. But yeah, you got those two guys out there, and man, you're set. So offensively, yes, they might have a slow start just because defense are obviously going to key in on those two guys. That's the key players. But I think this might open things up for Mahomes to kind of go back to his old play style of when he really came to the league and really kind of took it by storm, where he was really making a lot of plays with his legs as well as his arm. But that defense is definitely a little suspect. Like you said, some of the players on there are getting a little older, and we definitely saw them get exposed a few times last season. That Raider game comes to mind, where I believe it was a tight game, and the Raiders ended up taking that one. But I don't know, man. It's tough. Again, it's to me going up against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes is almost like picking against Bill Belichick. It's really hard for me to do it. Even though I think that they're probably a little bit worse off than they were last season. I think that they can right the ship and find a way to game plan and maneuver their way into being just as good as they were.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine. I'm just a little curious if that offensive line shuffle maybe gives them off to a little bit of a slow start. Super Bowl loser, there's always a little bit of a hangover there. And I'm just curious how much, age sort of takes its toll on the Kansas City Chiefs. But if you have Hill, Kelsey, Mahomes, and Andy Reid, for that matter, I think you'll be just fine. But I am a little curious about this Las Vegas Raiders team. They sort of got rid of most of their offensive line. Everyone seems a little bit confused as to why, since it was a pretty solid offensive line. But I guess that's a way to cut your cost. But I guess Derek Carr is going to be their QB again next year, but that always seems up in the air. Josh Jacobs, good running back. They did get rid of Nelson Aguilar. They brought in John Brown, the aforementioned Buffalo Bill guy. Henry Ruggs, explosive. I don't know if you can count on him game to game. They bring in, a mid-tier guy in Willie Snead. They signed Kenyon Drake. I just nothing really upgraded on the defensive end, which they were awful on last year. I'm just curious. Do you know what the Raiders are doing, and what sort of strategy are they going with in this weird offseason?
I think that they're looking to bring in one of the highest paid assistant coaches and defensive coordinators and probably give them a 15-year, $200 million deal and hope that that rights the ship because they're not making any moves that are, groundbreaking whatsoever. The fact that they're sticking with Derek Carr, even though he's shown time in and time out that he's good enough to make you want him, but he's not good enough to make you want to keep him. And somehow they still keep him. So I don't know exactly what's going on there. They're not showing any signs. I don't know if it's the move, that they're kind of trying to get their feet under them still and kind of establish themselves as the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't know what it is, but I don't like any of the moves they made. I feel like even though they didn't lose some super talented guys, they lost guys that were definitely contributing enough to that team to make a difference. I don't know what they're doing. They have to go up against the Chiefs every season, twice a year, so it doesn't look good for them. But then again, every time I go up against the Raiders or pick against them, they somehow manage to pull rabbit out of a hat and pull off some nasty win where they make the game look super gritty and they look like the toughest team ever, like the Raiders of the 80s and early 90s. But then I get on the boat and they start putting up duds. So I don't know what to think about the Raiders. I just don't like any of the moves that they made personally.
Yeah, I look for this team to sort of regress and the Chargers probably to take over their spot in there. I really think it's possible the Raiders might finish last in this division, depending on what the Broncos decide to do at quarterback. But we'll get into this San Diego or Los Angeles Chargers team. They lose Hunter Henry, but they do bring in Corey Linsley, a top-notch center from the Green Bay Packers. Melvin Ingram has not been re-signed yet, but I think they will bring him back. I think this team will just improve. The question probably is, defensively where they sit. Will Melvin Ingram be back? Darwin James had a big-time rookie year and then has been, lost for the season 2 years in a row. What do you see in this Chargers team? I'm just curious on your take. Are they going to improve, or are they going to be a fun stats bad team once again?
This one's a tough one for me, and I'm not by any means whatsoever a Charger fan, even though they're in LA now, and I'm a big LA fan, being from Southern California. I don't see much of an improvement there, but I will say that I was one of the few people that was really excited about that team, and I constantly picked them to win games, even though they let me down several times. I really like the young guys. I think that they have a really good core of young guys that they can develop. That showed a lot of promises last season, and they've got some pretty nice weapons outside at the wide receiver position, at the skill position. So I think that they can improve. How much I don't know. How much improvement can you really expect from a guy like Herbert, who had a rookie of the year? He had a really good season. Um, I don't think you can expect a really big leap forward, but if there's any type of leap, I think that it's going to help that team out. Um, they were a lot of close games, so maybe the team matures enough to the point where they don't lose those close games anymore. And if that's the case, then like you said, I definitely see them leapfrogging the Raiders. And with any slight improvement, I think it won't even be close.
Yeah, I just don't have a good read on the Chargers and how they're going to be. I assume Herbert will be a little bit better, a little bit, smarter in the pocket. You know they have weapons at receiver. Running back, a little hot and cold. Austin Eckler, I don't think took that number one running back role as well as some people thought. Some of it had to do with injury. We spoke about the defense. They have a lot of a handful of really high-level, high-skilled blue chip guys, but in between those guys are some really, really poor defenders, and they were really bad at defense at times last year. So I'm just no clue on how to get a read on the Chargers right now.
Yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from. It's a tough team to read, but I was supportive of them when they were bad last season, so it's hard for me to really sit here and say that I don't think they'll improve, even if it's just slightly.
Yeah. All right. We'll go to our last team in the AFC. And I think this really is the most interesting team, the Denver Broncos. They really didn't bring in much free agency wise. They were sort of right on that cap mark, but they didn't really need to. They're pretty loaded on defense. I'm assuming Von Miller comes back healthy. Bradley Chubb is a beast in there. Dramont Jones, really good player. You got great corners in Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby. They did bring in, who's been solid when he's healthy, Kareem Jackson at safety. Really good defense. Offensively, Melvin Gordon and Royce Freeman at running back, Sutton Judy, Tim Patrick, Noah Fant as skill position guys. I mean, this team is loaded except for the quarterback position. Now, the rumors were flying about a week ago that the Broncos were offering up Drew Lock pretty much anywhere. They sit in a little bit of a weird draft spot. I don't know if the top guys are going to fall to them. Do they trade up and try to put a rookie quarterback in there? I don't know if there's really a veteran quarterback that you could bring in that's, going to carry you into the promised land. But I look at this roster, and literally they're, a okay quarterback away from being a pretty solid team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue for them is, the division that they're playing in. It's hard to really see them leapfrogging the Chiefs anytime soon.
Yeah.
So I think that's their biggest hurdle right now. But like you said, just going up and down this list, I mean, you guys like Simmons, Harris, they've got a lot of really solid players on both sides of the ball. If they could get some sort of consistent play at the quarterback position, it's been bad for them. I mean, take it back to last season when they had that situation where they had all the quarterbacks in the same room during the whole COVID safety protocol. They had to, what was it, a wide receiver that they put in there at quarterback? I mean, they just had really bad luck when it came to the quarterback position. And I'm not a believer in Drew Lock. I don't think he's got it. Maybe he could turn things around. I don't know. I just don't see it. I think that they would probably even be better off if they would have made a move for a guy like Sam Darnold. Even though I'm not a huge Darnold fan, I think that he's more serviceable than Drew Lock is. Drew Lock made so many different mistakes last season, and he was in and out of the lineup. You can't have that, especially when you have the type of situation that the Broncos are in right now, which, like we said, on paper they look really stacked. They have a lot of guys who put up some really good stats, both offensive and defensively. So it's you as a Bronco fan, I'm sure that you're looking at this, you're like, please don't spoil this opportunity. We have a shot at being a good team, or at least being competitive, which is not something that we've seen since the Peyton Manning days.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I don't understand why the Broncos. You mentioned Sam Darnold. Why didn't they go after somebody like Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
you put Ryan Fitzpatrick on this roster, and you could convince me this could be a top 4 team in the AFC, pretty easy. And you're just rolling the dice with Drew Lock, or you're going to trade up and you're going to put a rookie quarterback in there, and it's not Trevor Lawrence and any of the rookie quarterbacks. I don't trust to carry your team. You're probably better off with Drew Lock in there. I do just don't quite understand why they didn't go and find one of those veterans. You mentioned Sam Darnold. Even that would have been an upgrade over a Drew Lock. And then their backup quarterback, Brett Rippon or Jeff Driscoll, that's not doing anybody any favors either. It just seems weird to have that kind of quarterback situation and this kind of roster. I don't understand it, and I guess, it's going to probably take them down, but I do see a whole lot of talent on this roster. I just wonder if it's, going to go to waste, before they can get somebody in there who can quarterback the team.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point that I was trying to make. Is if you're a Bronco fan, you're looking at this roster and you're like, God, just get us any quarterback. I mean, if you have to bring Peyton Manning back for one more season, take your.
At least he could probably get him into a set. I don't know if he could throw the ball, but that doesn't seem to affect Cam Newton too much. But I think Peyton could at least get him in the right play.
Listen, you get Peyton in that. You get Peyton under center. He gets back there. He starts throwing his Omahas, and next thing you know, he's selling, life insurance and homeowners insurance, trying to bundle you up. And next thing you know, defense doesn't know what's happening, and you've got your running backs running down the field. So I don't know, man. All jokes aside, I think they really have to address this quarterback situation because, like you said, they definitely have the potential to be a good team. They're just a quarterback away.
I would throw out, once again, Gardner Minshew would look nice in a Denver Bronco uniform, and I think with these weapons could upgrade him. So don't forget Gardner.
Yeah,
All
no,
right,
definitely.
buddy, that's our show for today. Be sure to follow us on greenlightnetwork.org, Greenlight Network on Facebook and YouTube. Next week, we're going to do team needs from the NFL draft. I think we're going to split that up in 2 parts, a Wednesday and Sunday showing next week. Are we doing 2 parts?
Yeah, I think so. It's really hard, especially if we decide to do it on live again. It's really hard to do 32 teams in one sitting, especially with the type of schedule that we actually have to work. I wouldn't call it 9 to 5, but we have regular jobs that we have to do. This is more of a passion for us, more of a hobby, something we really enjoy. We both really like talking football, and sports in general. So yeah, we're gonna split it up that way we can bring more in-depth personal analysis type of talk. So that we don't dilute any of it, and we can really get into a lot of these teams into a little more in depth than we would if we had to do all of them at one time.
Yeah, so Wednesday, Sunday next week, we'll have Achilles Rain in here doing our NFL draft team needs. We'll also have Dynamite David in next week to do his NFL draft player ranking. So big 3-show football time week. And then the week of the draft, we'll be doing our own NFL mock draft where we'll put on our GM hats and we'll see how we do with that. Achilles, where can we find you?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at TD Achilles, or you can find me on Facebook under Achilles Rain.
You can find me, GLNChamp5, on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to subscribe and like our show on YouTube. That's our show, and we're out.